Okay, so we're back at Cracks in Postmodernity with Nick Leeper of the Society of Jesus. That means he's a Jesuit. And we're having you on because we recently reviewed your exhibit, Twilight of the Idols, on our
Mhm.
Substack. And people were very interested. Some people were very upset. So I thought, why not just have you on to talk about it, since everyone has their opinion.
Yep. And, yeah, everybody's welcome to have an opinion, of course. And yeah, but happy to be here and chat more about it.
So, for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your backstory. Who are you? What's your deal? How do you get involved with the Jesuits, etc.?
Sure. So I'm Nick Leeper. I'm from Jersey, originally from Morris County, Rockaway, New Jersey. And yeah, I went to K through 8 Catholic school, public high school. But I met the Jesuits we have a retreat house out in Morristown.
Ah, yeah.
And that's where I first met the Jesuits. Um, and yeah, really like growing up in diocesan parishes, um, going there for the first time in high school, was really just eye-opening for me. The
Mhm.
spirituality, the way the Jesuits listened to me, the way they just engaged with religion was really, really attractive for me. And then I went to Rutgers in Newark, started a business school there, then switched to being a history teacher. And yeah, but still stayed in touch with the Jesuits and whatnot. Um, yeah, and then later on, actually, my at the end of college, my mother, she passed away from cancer. And then I was really kind of thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I was thinking about teaching. I was thinking about working in parishes, doing religious ed, which I had a job lined up for. Um, and yeah, but I was really thinking, what is my vocation? And I just felt more and more called to priesthood and in the society in particular. Um, yeah, so about 5 years of working in the high school for a little bit, and then in Newark, New Jersey, and in public high schools too. And then in parishes scattered about the Archdiocese of Newark. I entered the Jesuits after that. And as a Jesuit, I've been a Jesuit now for 7 years. That sounds right. 7 years. And yeah, I did my novitiate in Syracuse, went to St. Louis for philosophy, and now I'm at New York and about to leave for Boston College for theology. But I teach now at Xavier High School,
Mm,
where we are right now.
yeah.
And yeah, so but really art for me, kind of getting into that just a little bit.
Yes.
It it kind of emerged more as a Jesuit. Um I did art in high school and everything, public high school, but um I didn't really have any great teachers, I think. It was fun and everything, but when I got to college, I thought this is not a serious thing. Like, what could you do with this, really? Um, and then when I entered this society, we do the 30-day silent retreat, the
Mm,
exercises of St. Ignatius. And we were told, we prepared for months before doing the retreat. And we were told, like, you can't bring any books, you can't read anything. And we didn't have phones in the novitiate
right.
or anything. And, so it was very, like, anxiety inducing a little bit.
Sure.
What are you going to do for 30 days of silence where the only person you talk to is your spiritual director for 45 minutes?
Yeah.
And that's it. Um, and so we were there for a few days, kind of like to rest before we got really started with the retreat. And they have this library at Wernersville, which is this old, old novitiate in Pennsylvania, no longer a retreat house or anything. They had this big library, kind of like the one we're in, and I was going around it before the retreat started. And they had this art book by Sister Wendy Beckett, who's a great art
Yeah.
critic
Yeah.
from Britain. And I picked it up and I thought to myself, in a true casuist sort of way, that, oh, well, this isn't really reading. So I'll take this to my room and have this for the exercises in case I get bored. But it turned out to be very graced because, yeah, I would look at it a little bit, but then it would actually accompany me when I was doing my prayer periods. Um, in the exercises, you pray a lot with the episodes from Jesus's
Yeah.
life. And so when I would be praying about Jesus walking on water or about the Emmaus story, I would look in that art book and I would find a picture that kind of related to it. And I would just set it up, put it on my chair across from me. and just start praying. And it would kind of inform my prayer. But afterwards, I had this very powerful experience on the exercises too, of just realizing really, right, the Jesuits and
Mm.
becoming a priest, those are all really secondary in my life. And really it's, God loving me for who I am. And this is all a pathway perhaps to get there. So far it's working. So um um but yeah, it's a pathway to becoming your true self, or becoming freer, more like Christ. Um yeah, and I found like art really helped me kind of do that,
Mm.
enter into these meditations a lot more
Yeah.
intensely in a way that I never experienced before. And so then I finished the novitiate. I moved to St. Louis, and we have to start doing ministry and work and whatnot. And I'm teaching at this school, I'm tutoring more or less. And at the same time, I'm taking a sculpture class
Mm.
in graduate school for philosophy studies. And everything kind of started to coming together. Things in class were kind of moving towards like philosophy of art and things like that, the sculpture class. But then more importantly, in ministry, I was working with some of these young people. And I remember one student had special needs and he always needed an adult near
Mm.
him. And they asked me, they said, hey, we need this kid to graduate. Can you just be with him when you're working? Can you just be with him in his classes for a few of his
Yeah.
classes? And I said, yeah, of course. Well, what's the class? And they said art. And I said, what are we going to do in art? Like, how can you fail eighth grade art? But there's a way apparently.
Yeah.
And he was really accomplishing it. Um, but it was torture for like months of just me and him sitting there together.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be there. The teacher didn't know what to do with him. He would just get up and run around. And it was just like we were always waiting for the bell. But one day I decided, I was like, I'm so sick and tired of this, but I'm gonna just go in. Just gonna say to, we'll call him William for this sake,
Mm.
but William, like, do you just want to learn how to draw something? Like, forget all this other project that you're working on. You're not doing it anyway. Like, let's just like, do you want to learn how to draw? And I knew a little bit from high school. And so we did that, and he was really engaged, and we were drawing some video game character. But and then the bell rang, 40 minutes later, but we were both shocked just because it was like he, for this first time, really was like engaged in something.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and I had that experience, and then another experience that was really profound for me with a student. After that, I started teaching art and an after-school program, doing sculpture mainly. And there was this boy. We'll also call him William for our sakes, but um,
William the second.
William the Second. Yeah, there we go. Kind of the conqueror too. But anyway, but he would always come in, and he was always angry, but he
Mm.
always would build dinosaurs, and at the end of class would always destroy them. It was like quite a art
Wow.
therapy
Yeah.
psychology
Yeah.
thing. And but it was always just let him kind of do his own thing. But one day he came in and he was making all these jokes about divorce and
Oh.
how his dad left him. I don't know if you heard this, like, oh, dad went to go get the milk and never came back.
Yeah.
And he was making these jokes. And I said to
Wow.
him, I said, William, you can't really, shouldn't really be making those jokes like with the whole class and everything. Um and then he told me to buzz off in stronger language.
Oh.
And I said, well, now we really got to talk about it. Um Moved to another room. He was crying, crying.
Oh.
But I think, and right, like a lot of the kids I worked with in North
Mm.
St. Louis came from very broken
Yeah.
homes. Um and you could tell this really affected him. And so I said, let's kind of get past the whole thing. You seem obviously very upset, and this is very raw for you. Why don't you stay in this room and I'll go into the other room and kind of hop between, but you could keep working here. And so he was. But when I came back at the end of class, he made something new.
Mm.
He made this like rock, and it had a flower, like a rose kind of growing
Oh,
out of it,
wow.
not a dinosaur.
Ah.
And I asked him, I said, William, no, this is very different. Like
Mm.
what's going on here? And, with tears in his eyes, he was like, I think this is like an island in the middle of an ocean,
Whoa.
and it grows, this flower is growing from it, but not from fresh water, but from the salt water that surrounds it.
Mm.
And, he's in middle school, and he took it home and he left, but he was, comforted at least. But I just thought later on, like, that encapsulated his whole experience of being isolated, being
Yeah.
abandoned, but finding nourishment
Wow.
like this flower that he imagines in this ocean. And yeah, it just moves me thinking about it too. And then he wasn't totally fixed. He came back making dinosaurs the next
Yeah.
time and everything. But
Mm,
but there was this moment in time
yeah.
where art was able to express something deeper for him, about himself
Yeah.
and his spiritual life, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and so that really got me on the track to doing art more and more professionally and everything like that, seeing it as
Mm.
this tool to help us really come closer to God, rather than just something, galleries sell or people put on the wall or things like that.
But so as a Jesuit scholastic in formation, how long is the whole process, first of all?
The whole process is 10 or 11
All
years
right.
from novitiate to ordination. But then
Okay.
even after that, like you go to tertianship, so like even that could be longer, and that's a little
Sure.
more ambiguous.
But how does this work? Like, how do you get to do art while you're in formation? Like, how does it become integrated into this journey of yours, this
Yeah.
formation experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one I don't necessarily know. But I mean, it's just happening, and that's kind of it. I think,
Yeah.
well, like in St. Louis, I was taking classes in art, and my philosophy thesis was very much tied into doing a solo show there and everything. And so that kind of supported it.
But you
And
have to ask your superior
yeah,
permission.
right. And they've been very generous with giving all of that.
Because I mean, like from the way you describe it,
Mm,
it's clearly this is a part of your
right,
spiritual path. Like it's part
right.
of your vocation. So I
Mm,
think I would imagine like that your formators, your superiors like recognize that okay, this is something that's
yeah,
has something to do with the formation process. Like it's
right.
not extraneous,
Right,
you
right.
know.
And yeah, a lot of guys kind of find
Yeah.
their, not that you need to find your shtick as a Jesuit.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people think like, oh, you got to be like the ethics guy or the philosophy guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily true, but it's really, are you continuing to develop where God is calling you?
But that is a thing that I've seen in my experience with
Right,
various Jesuits that like all of them do have their thing.
right,
And I at least from what I understand about like the Ignatian charism, this kind of encouraged because I don't know, like there's this emphasis on conscience, on discernment, and
right.
that like, okay, like if this particular thing helps you in your vocation, and like it seems like you're encouraged to explore that.
Yeah,
Which
certainly.
I think is, I don't know, for me, like that's an important part of Ignatius, who's behind this, about his charism. That
Yes.
like, I don't know, there's this trust in like,
Mm,
okay, that God reaches you in a particular way.
mm.
And sometimes that means like your spirit has to take a risk on
Yes.
that. And
Yeah,
like
yeah.
maybe you screw it up, but like there's a value in taking that risk and like seeing, okay, is God reaching me in this particular way that he may not reach the others in the same way, you know.
Right.
But okay, so let's get into the exhibit, Twilight of the Idols. How does the idea come to be? How was this born?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, when I was in St. Louis, I did the solo show and I made an icon-ish sort of thing in that
Hmm.
show. Not like the stuff that was in Twilight of
Yeah.
the Idols. But I was fascinated learning about icons, and I knew about them from growing up. My
Hmm.
mom was Polish, and we grew up Catholic and everything, and
And was she Byzantine
not
Catholic?
Byzantine, but
Okay.
I mean, the Poles have
So they, yeah,
icons
it's
everywhere
still
still.
Eastern.
Right.
Yeah.
And so our house was just like flooded with
Yeah.
icons and things like that.
Mm,
And so I knew what they were. They
yeah.
were everywhere. But like, and like they were all worn usually because you would touch them or kiss them or whatever in the house. But I never really thought about how this is different than something you look at in a museum.
Yeah.
Um, or what makes this a unique thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I was really fascinated learning about icons. And so in St. Louis, I kind of went more into that. And then when I moved to New York, I had to switch my practice because my studio was different and
Yeah.
I couldn't do oils anymore or sculpture anymore, which is what I did in St. Louis. So I switched to acrylic.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, just found this intersection of iconography and pop art to be pretty fascinating. Um, and so that's kind of how it developed. And then even in that, like the
mm,
subject of all these paintings in Twilight of the Idols is from, or most of them are from ads.
yeah.
And so the thing of, right, a lot of or some Christians talk about modern idolatry, and they
Yeah.
always kind of refer to commercialism as that. And so it's kind of putting the ads, excuse me, into these iconic
Hmm.
settings and then helping us think, well, is this really an idol or is this an
Yeah.
icon? And how do we think about these things?
But I mean, but where did pop art come into the picture? Like how, like what's your relationship with pop art?
Yeah. Well, also at the same show in St. Louis, one of the pieces I made was a Brillo tabernacle, which of course is a riff on Warhol's
Yeah.
Brillo boxes.
Yes.
Um, but in the philosophy of art, Brillo box, according to Arthur Danto, one of my favorite philosophy of art guys, he talks about how Brillo box ended art forever
Hmm.
and killed art
Wow.
because you take something that's ordinary, a Brillo box that you would find in the supermarket, and now you make it art. It looks the same, more or less, but now you put it in a gallery. And now what's the difference between the one in the grocery store and the one in the gallery? And so he says pop art killed art because before that, art with a capital A was always understood as something that has significant form, something that you look at, but it's different than any other ordinary thing because of its composition, its lighting, its
Hmm.
color, it's all these other things. Clive Bell, who wrote art in 1911, I think he kind of articulates this whole theory of formalism, which comes to kind of dominate art
Hmm.
retrospectively and into the future, until pop art kind of puts that all to an end, saying, well, there is no difference. It's not like the one in the store, the Brillo box in the store has significant form, and the one in the gallery does as well.
Hmm.
Um, so that whole
Yeah.
theory kind of falls apart. Um, and so Brillo was interesting for me because I found that um, it ended art, but the thing also on the flip side of that is something started art. And the idea is that the Renaissance was kind of this period where the looking aspect of
Hmm.
art, the significant form kind of comes into play with Da
Yeah.
Vinci and all these guys doing the math kind of underneath the hood of paintings. Um, but this one other guy, Hans Belting, who's a German philosopher, he talks about how medieval art, like icons, was very different because it wasn't art with a capital A. You touched icons. You don't
Hmm.
touch art in the museum. You would venerate them. You would talk to them. You would kiss them. You would do all these things. And he said that the image
Hmm.
existed before art, but they're not the same thing. And
Yeah.
so for me, I find that it really relates back to what I was saying about the spiritual exercises, that art really does something.
Hmm.
And in this sense, pop art and medieval art both do something.
Yeah.
Pop art, you just, or the Brillo boxes, you buy in the store and you use them. They're things from ordinary life. And medieval art is something you use in a very particular way. But both are using them, where art, everything in between that was all about what Marcel Duchamp would call the retinal shutter, just our eyes.
Yeah.
And that's all you kind of do. Um, and so I'm very interested in this question of art for a purpose or art that does something in this part, kind of a
Hmm.
participatory sense.
Okay. Um, so one of the things I said in the Substack post is that like you look at these pieces in the exhibit, and I feel like if you're not already in the know, it's hard to understand what's going on. And
Right.
like, okay, because I'm obsessed with Warhol, blah, 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 I got most of it, but what really helped was when you started telling me the backstories behind each piece. Because some of them, okay, inspired by ads, some of them inspired by people or experiences in your life. Um, and that's when it really became something profound for me that like I could see touches on my own spiritual life. It makes me ask questions about my relationship with God. So, I mean, just can you give a couple quick examples of these backstories that
Yeah.
inspired a couple of the main pieces?
Um, yeah, like um well, yeah, the big one, I think, the soul of the show really is the Annunciation, which
Yeah.
is a woman on the phone.
Mm.
She's looking out at the viewer. It's very simple
Yeah.
in that kind of sense. But it's actually a portrait of my mother,
Yeah.
who I mentioned died 10 years ago. And for me, really, the style is also her too.
Mm.
The religious iconography with the pop art is kind of who she was in a certain sense. Very religious, never skipped mass on a Sunday, but also loved everything pop culture, loved the Beatles, all those folks and everything. And Yeah, and she's on the phone, but above that painting was another painting, The Call of Matthew, which
Mm.
was a self-portrait of
Yeah.
myself from before being a Jesuit. Um, and my imagination is that art really is like a phone call in this sense. Like I said, art that does something. It's not just about looking, but what's the conversation it's leading us to. And so in one sense, it's saying like, okay, in theory, right, art is about this phone call. But for me personally, every time I paint one of these paintings, it's like being on the phone with my mom, I imagine,
Mm.
connecting with her in a new way. And in a way that I can't now because she's gone physically from this world, but her life hasn't ended, I believe it has changed. And so for me, that changed life now exists in the gold leaf and the Ben-Day dots. Not exclusively, of course, but for me, that's a way to connect with her beyond the grave. Um, yeah, and also too, the Annunciation, right? It's this opening moment when
Hmm.
Mary says yes, that let's go out into the world. And for me, she's my Annunciation for this whole style, this whole project, and everything. Um, yeah, it's picking up the phone,
Mm.
really.
What about the flight from Egypt?
Right. Yeah.
So there are like many layers
There's
to
many
that.
layers of that one. I was talking to some people after you came and visited, and they said it looked like some Star Trek character. But it's a airline stewardess who's sitting on this chair, and it's based off an ad from American Airlines that said the big text of it says, "Imagine her as your mother," and then it has all this paragraph about how airline stewardesses are motherly and anticipate your needs and all
Mm.
this stuff. Um, and so what attracted me to do it was, of course, that tagline of "Imagine her as your mother," and thinking the title also, the other title for it is Our Lady Help of Christians, just very on the surface of it, who is Mary but our help in the skies, if you
Mm.
will, the person who's helping us get to where we need to go, praying
Hmm.
for us.
Yeah.
Um, and but I think more deeply, right, that image, that ad has a history to it, especially in unionizing of flight attendants back in the 60s and 70s, where back then, if you were a young woman and you had to be a young woman to be a flight attendant, you got fired once you turned 30, had a baby, or got married.
Mm.
And so it's pretty hypocritical that American Airlines and all these other places are saying, oh, your flight attendant is like a mother, but they fire mothers.
Mm.
And so when the flight attendants started to unionize, that ad was actually put on some of their picket
Yeah.
lines saying, well, treat us like mother, we're mothers, but let us still work here. And eventually they succeeded, and now a flight attendant could be anybody. And they don't get fired immediately because of the good work these women did in unionizing. And so that image too, I see, has this political undertone of a walkout involved with it.
Mm.
And the flight into Egypt, right on the surface, it's a flight, right? So there's the pun there. But more deeply, right, Herod is seeking to kill the Messiah.
Yeah.
And it's an unjust thing he's doing. And so Mary and Joseph flee the country in a kind of other walkout
Yeah.
of sorts.
Mm.
And so I kind of see that their action kind of parallels the walkout of the flight attendants in a certain sense.
Mm.
Of course, not exactly the same way, but
Yeah.
would Mary, if she had a job, would she unionize? Would she walk out? I think that's a good question for us to
Mm.
consider.
Okay, and one more. The
Sure.
Visitation, my favorite.
The Visitation, yes. The lightning rod of the show, but
Was that the most controversial?
it's definitely appeared on all the other articles and
Like
things.
the smoking's bad?
Well, actually, I found that I forget if I told you this when you came to visit, but well, that one, just to describe it a bit, it's two women who are taking a smoke break and they're lighting each other's cigarettes
Yes.
with their Zippo lighters, and this is an ad from Zippo.
Okay.
And it looks like they're coming back from the grocery store, or Mary's coming back from a drive, and she has her driver's gloves and her car keys, and they're taking the smoke break. And the halos, though, are around the objects
Yeah.
in addition to the women. So Mary and Elizabeth are the two women, and then the lighter is John the Baptist, and then either the flame or the cigarette is Christ.
Yeah.
I'll leave that to you to think
Mm.
about which was which. Um, but the idea with that one is it's should really help us think more deeply about metaphors and things like that. And what do we really mean when we say Christ is like light, or Christ is the good shepherd, or
Mm.
Christ is our rock? All these are metaphors of
Yeah.
things, but they're not literal. And so they help us get to somewhere more deeply about our knowledge of God. Um, but the problem with those metaphors is that they're kind of dead metaphors in a certain sense. We're
Mm,
so used to hearing that Christ is our rock, it almost doesn't mean anything unless we really are thinking about it.
yeah,
And so we often just kind of can brush all of those off and not really think about what we are saying or believing about God.
yeah.
Um, and so this really kind of pushes that to help us
Yeah.
snap out of that a bit and really
Hmm.
think, well, what does it mean if Christ is a flame? That's a little easy, but what does it mean if Christ is a cigarette? And if Elizabeth is smoking a cigarette and
Yeah.
Mary is smoking a cigarette, what does all that mean? And how does that kind of push us to get to something new in our conversation, in our prayer, really, with God?
Yeah. I mean, the idea that Christ might have something to do with lighting up a cigarette is not something foreign to cracks and foam.
Right.
So
Right.
I clearly was not uncomfortable with that.
Right.
Okay, but I want to get into like what it was that fascinated me, but also what really challenged me. So, I mean, I want to start out like in the Substack post, I cited William T. Cavanaugh, the theologian. I don't know, are you familiar with his
Not
work at
terribly
all?
familiar,
Okay,
no.
well, very much relevant because yeah, I mean, like his whole shtick, part of it is like consumerism and idolatry, and
Right.
how kind of building on Charles Taylor, John Milbank's work,
Right.
saying how, like, okay, secularism isn't actually the absence of religious
Mm.
worship, it's just that it shifts, it migrates
Hmm.
into other phenomena. So, like, yes, we're still very religious, but we worship these idols, we worship commodities, we worship money, comfort, etc. So it's like Kavanaugh offers like a very damning condemnation of this consumer culture. Um, and then, but this is why I love Warhol so much because he understands this
Right.
fact. He understands that, yeah, like we are worshiping these empty idols. We buy all these commodities, we look up to these celebrities, and ultimately these are finite things. Like they can't really satisfy the restless heart. But rather than saying, okay, it's all evil and we need to swear it off, is it possible that Christ enters into this very messed up, idolatrous culture and meets us there where we're at? Could he use these commodities? Can he use this kind of celebrity worship
Hmm.
to help us to see him, even through the cracks? And that's how we end up here. But so no, like if you take the Maryland diptych or the one with
Yeah.
like the bunch of Marylands, which is very much based on his experience growing up in a Byzantine,
Hmm.
right, church, seeing the icon screen at the altar. Um, Marilyn starts out pretty bright and then she starts to fade because
Hmm.
again, like worshiping an idol is something that can't lead you towards this ultimate fulfillment.
Right.
Um, but then even with like, okay, the Campbell soup can, I mean, for me, like, I guess there are several levels to those pieces of his of like products because again, it's like on one level poking fun at how much we kind of glorify these commodities, which aren't sacraments, they aren't sources of salvation, and yet there's a beauty in them. There's a
Hmm.
beauty in the kind of mundane, just like human quality. And at least with the Campbell soup, like, for him, he painted so many of them because it reminded him of when his mother would feed him when he was
Right.
sick in bed. And
Hmm.
then, he had like the Last Supper in the kitchen. So he would look at that and remember that, like, okay, this moment where I'm just eating some Campbell soup has something to do with Christ.
Hmm.
But also like the beauty of the can. Like there's as much as again, like this is a consumer commodity and Campbell's is making lots of money off of it. Like the fact that this product is beautiful, the packaging is beautiful, points to something greater than capital, greater than idolatry.
Right.
So it's my whole fascination with Warhol is this subversion from within, like trying to open up the space for God in a culture that's very much that tries to close him out by
Hmm.
worshiping other things. Um, but again, it's this idea that like sanctity doesn't come from us swearing off everything evil per se, but rather like asking God to incarnate himself in the midst of our messy society,
Right.
our messy humanity. And this is like what fascinates me about what you're doing. I feel like you're building on this intuition, you're going deeper into it. Um, but then this is where I get a little uncomfortable because these are icons. Like I feel like with Warhol, the line is clear. Like, okay, you have the Byzantine icons, you have his pieces which are inspired by them,
Hmm.
but he's not presenting them as icons. They
Right.
are just art,
Yeah.
secular art, if we want to call it that. So when I see a Byzantine icon based on an advertisement or playing with kind of pop art motifs, it's like, oh, this is like, oh, can I like actually pray in front of this thing? Is it appropriate to use this format to explore such ideas? But that's the thing. It's like, where is this line between sacred and profane secular art?
Hmm.
When I look at an advertisement, when I want to buy, I see an ad for the new iPhone, for new shoes, whatever
Hmm.
it is, and I start to get fixated on it. Like, yeah, I want to buy that. Like, am I not worshiping that icon? Is that blasphemous that I do that? So, yes, like it made me uncomfortable. Yes, I feel like this is kind of iffy, but ultimately it's in service of this very important question. And this is where I like ultimately, like I say, okay, to accuse it of blasphemy is, I think, going too far because, I opened the article with the example of piss Christ, which, yeah, like it makes you ask an important question. Is Christ in the pissy, shitty situations in life?
Right.
Should you actually put a crucifix in a cup of pee? I would not want to do that. I'd be afraid of going to hell. Um, so yeah, like I think the format, the style, it makes me uncomfortable. But these people are accusing it of blasphemy. I'm like, okay, but objectively, what is
Right.
sacrilege here? Because there's nothing, I didn't see anything that was like, okay, this is objectively glorifying something disgusting or evil. Like, yeah, iffy, okay, like you have Catherine of Alexandria in a sleeveless dress. Oh my, and they're smoking a cigarette and it's Jesus. Like, okay, there's nothing bad.
Right.
But uncomfortable, yeah, risque, yeah. And that's where I'm just like, that's not a bad thing per se. Um, and this impulse to be like, okay, it makes me uncomfortable, therefore it's blasphemous. I'm like, well, why can't we sit with the discomfort and ask, okay, like what's going on here? What are you trying to do? What is this saying to my soul? Is this knee-jerk kind of reaction that I think is immature and not helpful, but yeah, like that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm kind of happy you made me uncomfortable because it forces me to ask these things. And I was very interested in like how you responded when I expressed my discomfort to you because you quoted First Corinthians.
Right.
And I mean, so say something about that because that like
Yeah.
helped me to go deeper into that
Right.
discomfort.
In First Corinthians, Paul's writing to the Corinthians, and chapter 1, I think 20, verse 24 to 28 in there,
Hmm.
he's talking about the scandal of the cross.
Yeah.
And he's saying that, well, the Pharisees and the Judaizers, they find the cross scandalous because the idea of God, A, becoming man and then dying is a total scandal.
Hmm.
But then the Greeks, the Gentiles, they find it hilarious
Yeah.
because, like, they worship Apollo and Zeus, these strong, mighty gods, but you worship this guy who died like a criminal,
Hmm.
poor. And so they find it funny, and the Jewish leaders and everybody find it scandalous. But Paul says something very important. It's in the middle of that where we find the power and the glory of God.
Hmm.
And it's in the cross that we find that. And so it's in between these two poles. And I find my whole experience doing this style now for about 2 years, getting both of those responses, or really all three of those responses, but right, from some who, called to have the show canceled at the Sheen Center and have been putting a bunch of things online. Right, they're very faithful people, and I think they're doing what they think is best,
Hmm.
and they find it scandalous. But then on the
Yeah.
other side, people who don't know anything about religion find it hilarious. But for me, at least, and I think
Yeah.
in our conversation here, it's how do we go deeper than both of those things and find God there?
Yeah, but that's, yeah, I mean, because when you said that, it really helped me to understand, again, my immediate reaction of discomfort. Because, on one hand, okay, like you have this Pharisaical, legalistic approach, like if it's in any way risque, in any way pushing boundaries, categorically bad,
Right.
let's not even think about it. Let's not even explore. It's just bad. And you can count on, LifeSite News to do that. That's kind of their spiel.
Right.
That's how they get their clicks.
Yeah.
Fine, whatever. But then again, there's like, okay, the like, you know, I call it the kind of like elitist cafeteria cat. Like, oh, that's cute. Like he did something creative.
Right. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, it's a little out there, but whatever. But I think again, like for someone who takes the cross seriously, who feels like, Christ has placed himself in their path and invites them to take up their cross, like it really, yeah, like the questions that it provokes in me really has something to do with that path, really has to do with picking up my own cross. Like I said, for similar reasons why I like Warhol, that it makes me ask like how does Christ enter into my relationship with the consumer culture that I'm
Right.
immersed in? The fact that I idolize very empty things, but also that like he can be present in something as simple as lighting up a cigarette with a friend, receiving a
Yep.
call from my mom, drinking apple juice, using the candles. Like
Right.
these are all questions that have a lot to do with my
Hmm.
relationship with Christ
Right.
crucified, etc. Um, but so the other thing that I did want to say, since you brought up the Sheen Center, like I find it ironic that they're the ones who canceled it, and then it ends up in what is it, the Mary Chapel
Mary Chapel
of
at
Francis
Xavier.
Xavier
Hmm.
Parish, which like for me, I'm just like just being super frank. Like I don't want to contemplate these very complicated questions while I'm in a liturgical worship space.
Right.
Like as much as I value the questions that are asked, I'm like, there's a time and place for it. I don't think the chapel is where I want to be doing it. And especially because, like I was saying before, if you don't already understand what pop art is, and if you don't know the backstories behind these pieces, like, yeah, it's kind of hard to enter into that initial discomfort and ask, like, so what's happening here? Like, no, I don't think the meaning is immediately accessible. So that's why I'm like, okay, do we want to be doing that here? I'd feel a lot more comfortable in an exhibit space like the Sheen Center. They
Right.
didn't agree, but okay, this is how it turned out.
Right.
So whatever.
Um, yeah, and
But do you see what I'm saying though about
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm
certainly.
like again, like I'm not like, oh my God, this is blasphemous. I'm just like, is this the best space? I wouldn't have chosen it, but
I didn't either.
so I can't blame you.
But no, but I find in some ways, right. I mean, for my intention
Yeah.
in a similar vein, it was like, yeah, I mean, I think people certainly could use it in liturgical space, but for me, it's more about I think you can engage with these deeper questions in a gallery space.
Yeah.
And usually I deal with secular galleries. I haven't really I've dealt with a couple
Mhm.
of religious galleries, like the Sheen Center and others. But I thought like, oh, this would be a great place
Yeah.
because we can have the conversation and it's not in a liturgical space, kind of doing all this other stuff there. But then it got canceled and moved to a liturgical space. And I find in that sense, actually, there was a lot of grace, I think, that came from that. Some of
Mhm.
the Jesuits who I live with say Mass there every morning,
Mhm. Yeah.
and they would preach
Interesting.
about the artwork. And they
Yeah.
would kind of make it come alive for people. And really, like for myself too, like in medieval times, that's what artwork was supposed to do. It wasn't
Yeah.
decoration for chapels. It was meant to be
Yeah.
preaching.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, and again, it's like if you understand the context, if you get what's going on,
right,
then like absolutely. It's just that it's hard to
right,
enter into if you don't know.
right, right, right.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
but I think for me, like, we talked about icons and kind of the aesthetic of icons and like,
Hmm.
oh, that's a whole other thing. And
Yeah.
I've went to a few icon workshops in schools and whatnot, not for terribly long or anything, but I've learned that there's several different um poles in that world.
Mhm.
Some folks, like I had this one great teacher, who was very kind of flexible on a lot of things. Like you could use
Hmm.
acrylic paint in icons and not go to
Oh,
hell.
wow.
Um,
Wild.
right, where other people thought like, well, if you don't use anything that's not egg tempera, like it's not an icon. Um, if you don't use real gold, it's not an icon. If you don't do this, if you don't do that, it's not an icon. So there's some folks who are very kind of open about what constitutes an icon, and other people who are very kind of closed.
Hmm.
And but it's all aesthetic. And even just thinking about the history of the icon, yeah, we have, of course, St. Luke doing the one of Virgin Mary. Um,
Hmm.
but one of the other more famous ones in the Western world, really one of the earliest that we know of and have of, is at where Pope Francis is buried in St. Mary Major in Rome.
Uh, yeah.
And Now it's a Western version, if you will,
Yeah.
but that one actually, in the time it was made, it looked a lot like a Roman noblewoman rather
Mm.
than
Yeah.
what we would think of as Mary, the Mother of God, if we lived back then. And they started putting the Greek lettering around the figures because they wanted to make it distinguishable from secular art.
Uh,
Because if you just had a woman with a red robe and a little blue sleeve, and you just look at it, and you lived in ancient Byzantium, you'd be like, well, who is this person? Like, this is just somebody
yeah.
on the street. But the idea was they started putting the Greek there to say, like, well, no, this is Mary, and we're going to use this for religious purposes. And so it has contingency. And then even further on, right, we think in the West that always wears blue. But in the East, she's always wearing red with blue underneath
Yeah.
because the idea was red represents humanity, blue represents divinity. And of course, Mary is holding divinity within her inner garment. But in the West, in the Proto-Renaissance era, they started depicting her in blue because
Mm.
the idea was kind of in this whole a little scandal, right? It's like Mary is now not the woman you're looking at on the street outside, but she's now in her
Uh,
inner chamber. And
okay.
you're getting this very intimate personal view of a woman alone in her inner garment,
Hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
just blue,
Wow.
because the red is off.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, of course, that just becomes normalized that Mary's
Mm.
always wearing blue and it's not a big deal. It's not scandalous to us,
Yeah.
right? But in that context and in that culture, that would have meant something
Yeah.
it would have been like having the shoulderless dress
Hmm.
for St. Catherine. It would be like, whoa, that's something you shouldn't wear to church. You don't wear your inner garment when you go outside.
Hmm.
You need to put your coat on as well, to be modest and all these other things. And so there's all this contingency that we
Mm.
just now take for granted and
Yeah.
think that is how it always was, and that's how St. Luke did it.
Yes.
Um, but I think, right, it's always evolving, it's always
Mm.
changing. And so for me, the idea is like the iconography is not a thing, but it's how we read artworks.
No.
And so any artwork can have that. We could apply that way of looking to it, even if it doesn't have Greek or gold leaf or
Mm.
whatever. But it's how we're engaging with the artwork. I think that's the key.
Okay.
Um,
Any responses to the exhibit that stood out to you in particular?
a lot of positive, I would say almost 100% positive comments in person and hearing from folks. Um, and yeah, just people being moved by certain pieces and
Mm.
whatnot. Um, it was only, people who haven't come to the show or whatever, would kind of, question, and I think rightly so, because it is new, it is confusing, it is, butting up our own expectations of what sacred art should be. So I get that, but like I said, I mean, hearing the priests tell me about how they would preach about the artwork in the chapel,
Mm.
um, to me, that was very moving because that's what I think art's job is to do,
Yeah.
and why I do it as a Jesuit as well, training for priesthood. I see this as it's training me to be a better preacher.
Mm. Okay.
And it's also just its own valid form of preaching. Not in the sense of just teaching us a lesson, that's teaching, I would say, but preaching is all about moving the heart. And how does that move closer and closer to God,
Yeah.
deeper and deeper in love?
Mm.
Um, yeah, and so hearing the priests, hearing the Jesuits say that they would preach about that, and hearing people say that they were so moved by hearing those homilies, um, you couldn't have that in a gallery.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think it's doing the job, in a way that I would never have expected it to
Mm.
do.
Any favorite like hate posts or comments about it?
Um, well, the ad hominem ones are always a little funny, like, oh, you're a terrible person, you're a very untalented person, looking for your 15 minutes fame, which I found actually a good compliment given Warhol.
Yeah.
But
Everybody in the future,
right,
everybody will have their 15 minutes of fame.
exactly. So I'm happy with mine. But yeah, but I find yeah, so it's silly stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, the Catholic Herald actually they had a piece reviewing the show, and it was all kind of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
I expect
which
more from the
yeah,
show.
but I actually have a reply coming out on Thursday in their publication
Good. Yeah. Okay.
to all that.
Okay.
Um,
That's reassuring
yeah,
because they're respectable.
yeah, right. And
Other,
so
unlike the other
that
ones.
was right, yeah, right, like Life Site. Yeah, but no, the editor was very gracious and
Okay.
everything,
Yeah, they're good people.
and so no, yeah, so but I think right, like, I would have loved if they came and chatted and wanted to learn more about the work and whatnot, but I think
But yeah,
yeah,
but that's the thing that like I accept that some people may disagree and like strongly believe that this is problematic. But
right,
like if you're going to do that, it can't just be these ad hominem like, oh, these damn Jesuits. Like
right,
you have to like actually say what's going on here that really scandalizes you. Like that I can take seriously.
right,
Just like, ah, it's terrible. All
right.
right.
And I've had a few conversations with people online and in person, where it started out kind of bad, but we would get to a place of
Yeah.
somewhere we can agree on and whatnot.
Yeah.
People wouldn't come away
Mm,
loving the work, but they would be like,
sure.
I at least understand what this is doing.
Yeah, but I think the explanation is important.
Yeah,
Because again, like if I didn't have an orientation of pop art and I knew nothing of the story, I would really have a hard time getting
yeah,
it. But once you do, it's like, ah, okay, I see.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And I wish I knew an easier way to help
Yeah.
people do that. And
Yeah.
that's, kind of why we're having this
Yep,
conversation. And
exactly.
I'm starting to do more of that. My spiritual director told me you need to put more interpretation out there.
No, it helps. It
Um,
helps.
But I think really, John Cage, one of my favorites as well, he has a line. He says the highest responsibility of the artist is to hide beauty.
Mm. Okay.
And I think, if we understand beauty as an experience rather than a thing,
Mm.
then that makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Because I think generally speaking, right, when we engage with an artwork, whatever it may be, um, if it's just beautiful and hits us in the face because it's a thing, right, it loses its power
Yeah.
in a certain sense. Um, and so beauty, right, being this experience, it
Yeah.
needs to kind of unfold and reveal
Yeah,
itself.
I mean that's Ratzinger Benedict
Right.
when he was like quoting the Greek theologian about, being wounded by beauty. Like for us,
Yeah,
it's not purely aesthetic experience, it's
exactly.
being pierced in the heart, like
Right.
Jesus on the cross.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, I wanted to wrap up asking you, because like we were saying this when we talked, that hey, like there are a lot of Catholics who are, starting artistic initiatives, making art.
Mm.
And there's always the risk for an artist of whatever faith to just make kitschy, sentimental, pious stuff, which is sure has some value, but isn't really saying much. Um, I don't know. So, like, if there are young Catholic or whatever artists of faith listening, I mean, what do you think is important to consider to like really make art that is valuable and not just kind of settling for this sentimental level?
Yeah. I think it's interesting in the history of art, right? We have a lot of great Catholic art, Christian art,
Yeah.
until after the Baroque period, and then it goes into Rococo, and then it becomes all very, girls on swings and puppy dogs and all this stuff that's
Yeah.
housed in Versailles.
Mm.
Um, and uh, it seems like, well, what happened to religious art? It
Yeah.
was so great. You had all these guys doing it. There's all these reasons for why it fell off. But I would say the biggest reason is because different churches actually found that in order to make good religious art, the artists themselves needs to be faithful. It wasn't
Mm.
so much about the idea
Interesting.
anymore, it was about the person. And so you would
Mm.
pay artists who were rather second or third rate, just because like, well, they weren't like Caravaggio murdering people over a tennis match. And so that's what the church kind of preferred in that era and onward for centuries.
Yeah.
And I would say right now, like we live with this whole theory of art where like the artist's life matters supreme, right? I mean, we talk about Warhol, right? But can we like just take a work and kind of be
Yeah.
able to look at it without always referring back to the artist
Yeah.
as the high priest of interpretation? Um, there's terms for these in philosophy of art, like actual intentionalism, where the only interpretation that matters is the artist's. But then there's also critical pluralism, which is about
Uh-huh.
how meaning comes about through conversation.
Mhm.
Yes, the artist's interpretation and intention is part of that, but it's not the whole story.
Okay.
And I think in that mode, once art kind of moved into the artist as high priest, then it became very important for religious artists to be very holy people which didn't necessarily mean they had to be good artists. They just had to be very holy people, which of course we want both, right?
Sure.
But again, if we look at the history of all these great artists that we talk about, they have very, well, like all of us sinners, right? They have very spotted lives, right? Um, and so I think like now in our time, it's to how do we, yes, how do we still live holy lives? Number one. And I love in iconography too. One of my teachers would say, yeah, we're trying to make icons, but the goal is to become an icon. And
Mm.
I think we need to keep that in mind for
Yeah.
sure. Like, but I think it's not it's a first things question, right? What comes first? Do we make the icon and then become holy, or do we have to be holy in order to make good art? And I think by making the art, we
Mm.
become holy, and that's kind of the theory of an iconographer.
Yeah.
And so I think the question for artists today is how do we get back to this idea of, well, idea in art, and how do we try to say something in that sense? And I think, right, it kind of counters this myth of the artistic genius as
Mm.
well. Um, there's this book that's out of this group in Harvard called Project Zero, which is an art education
Mm.
institute there. And I looked at them a lot. I teach art here at Xavier. Um, and one of their books is called what is it? Creative. Oh, I forgot the name off the top of my head. I'm sorry, um, but the main premise of the book is that ideas or people are not creative, ideas are creative.
Mm.
It'll come to me, I'm sure, as soon as we end this thing. But the whole point of it is that ideas are creative, not people. And so
Mm.
like it's not like some people have all these brilliant ideas that came to them down from heaven. It's like no, they live in a world and they just are very good at
Mhm.
taking a little bit of this, taking a little bit of that, and
Yeah.
kind of finding the synthesis between those two things. And so I think for Catholic artists today, it's how do we kind of think of our art more in that way? And yeah, like our own experience, like mine with my mother
Mm.
and my upbringing, like that's part of that synthesis. But it's not only exclusively self-expression, I think.
Yeah.
It's taking ideas from all these other aspects of art history, Warhol, the Proto-Renaissance, all these things, icons, and what are we doing with all these things? What are they trying to do? What are they looking to achieve? And so I think right now, how do we avoid kind of kitsch and that kind of stuff, which I'm not against kitsch at all,
Yeah.
growing up with all of it.
Sure.
But it has its place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do we kind of, yeah, think about beauty as this experience
Mhm.
of meaning, essentially, and which means that we have to think and we have to read and we have to consume good art in order to be able to enter into conversation with it and then turn it out ourselves, I think. Um, yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna wrap this up with, I think we're gonna mix a round of hot or not with blasphemous or not,
Okay.
pertaining to different works of art. So, all right, let's start with Piss Christ. Is it blasphemous?
It is absolutely not
It's
blasphemous. It
not at
is not
all.
blasphemous at all.
Really?
Serrano was actually invited by Pope Francis to the
So I was
Vatican.
wrong.
You're not wrong, but we just have,
You
have a
would put a
disagreement.
Eucharist,
I
a
wouldn't do it.
crucifix in
I
pee?
would not do it. I would not do it.
Oh, mm,
I'm glad Serrano did it. That idea has been done.
really?
But I think
Wow.
it shows us the reality of the incarnation. This is
Yes,
what
but
it
it's
shows
pee.
us. Well, right, exactly. But
Yeah.
this is the scandal that Paul talks about for the Judaizers. It's the idea of God becoming
Really?
human,
So
entering
much
into filth.
fallacy. So what about poop?
Well, they had that in Brooklyn back in 2000,
But
I
that's
think.
not
So
okay.
it's tough, but
It's poop.
I agree.
If I had to pick, it would be pee.
Well, if you had to pick
But
between,
because if you ingest pee, you don't get poisoned. Poop is toxic.
right,
So I don't. All right.
it's
Well,
tough.
that is
But
a
Serrano, I think, not blasphemous. Those other ones are a little bit more iffy. So
okay. Madonna like a virgin video.
for nowadays, definitely not
For
blasphemous.
nowadays, but for
No.
eternity.
For eternity, oh boy. Hmm, interesting. I think in a sense, uh, yeah,
I mean, the parts with Martin DePorres are
right.
not
Yeah,
good.
right. Yeah. I think the
Wait,
idea
no,
of
that's not, I'm sorry. That's like a prayer. I said like a virgin.
Oh, I thought you meant the
Like
like
a
a prayer.
virgin is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
one in Venice on the
Right, right.
Madonna. Like a prayer
I
is
was
when
imagining
he's
like a
in.
prayer. Right, that's the big
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
The-
yeah.
yeah.
I'm inclined to say no.
Wow.
Because again, my whole thing is how do we find God in
Okay,
this
this is the
somewhere?
Jesuit part
This
where I
is what
like
makes this
this is
tough. So,
I like to offend you guys and now Lady Gaga Alejandro eating the
eating the
rosary.
rosary.
The Vatican condemned it, which I
Right,
thought was a waste of time. It's like, what are you're still condemning pop stars? Like that's so
right.
80s Madonna.
Well, right. John Paul II, I think, said of Madonna's show that it's the most satanic thing that Earth has ever had.
I think there's much more
Right. And
satanic.
yeah, yeah, I think it's certainly again, it's very edgy and everything, but um, yeah,
Hmm.
not blasphemous, I think.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, it's going to be hard to get me to say something is.
Then you're not going to say the Met Gala was.
Oh, that was fine. That was
That's
all
fine. Yeah, I
pretty
don't.
vanilla.
I just thought it was cringe.
I
What?
thought it was, yeah, it was appropriation, right?
Cultural
Religious
appropriation.
appropriation, perhaps cultural. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so like okay, like Rihanna walking around like a bishop,
But
right?
I think what's even more cringe is like these people are like, oh my gosh, this is so disrespectful to our faith. And like, just don't respond and like pretend because you ultimately when you react, you're feeding people, you're fanning the flame. I'm just like, ignore it.
Yeah,
I mean, some of the exhibits were interesting to me.
yeah.
Some of the there are a couple of things in the at least I went to the cloistered one, which was a little
Yeah,
different, but
yeah,
like some of it to me was like, okay, that's disgusting. But the majority, I was like, okay, this is very interesting.
right.
But anyway, so this is more country. This is going to trip
Let's
you
do
up.
it.
Stockhausen,
Stockhausen.
the composer, said, well, this is going to get me in trouble. Said 9/11
Oh, yes.
was the greatest
Work of
work of
art. Yeah,
performance art.
yeah.
Is
And
that a good hot take?
I think it could be read as art, but I think that it kind of, right, that's the thing. I think with art, I was telling my friend this who yeah, she's a lesbian and has to deal with a lot of hate in the church her whole life and is really like stands up against it. And I was sharing with her about all my hate recently from the art and
Sure.
everything. And I said to her, I'm like, look, like at the end of the day, what I do, I paint plywood from my brother's garage and we call it art and put it in a gallery. Your life is what people are talking about.
Sure.
There's a difference.
Yeah.
And Warhol, and back to Warhol. Someone once said to him, like, "Oh, you must be so brave taking risks as an artist." And he responded, "I don't take risks. The people at D-Day took risks. I'm just,
Hmm.
I'm just
Okay.
doing other stuff." And I think, right, that's the end of that's really what it is in that sense. It's yeah. And so I think, right, in this case, with 9/11 being the greatest work of performance art, I think it's like, well, it's kind of blurring that line. It's not plywood that we're putting up that's harmless. It's actually killing people.
Yeah.
And so it's not really a performance. Can you find meaning in it? People have found meaning in it. But then it kind of, again,
Yeah.
to Arthur Danto's point, it kind of kills the word art because, like, well, what does really art mean in this sense?
But is art already dead?
Well, to
But
Danto,
that
yes,
see,
right,
but that see, and
exactly.
this is where like I'm scandalous for I'm like, yes, Stockhausen's kind of right. Like, obviously, I'm not gonna see. I get in trouble a lot for 9/11 related stuff because, like, of course, like, okay, we're in New York, people died, people's
Yep,
loved ones. Like, I get it, but like, once you, okay, what is it? It's 20. We're about to hit
yep,
25 years. I think there's a time and space to like explore the deeper questions about 9/11 on a symbolic level and like I don't know. I think Stockhausen, it was not prudent to say that a couple of days after 9/11, but was he
correct.
onto something? Absolutely, he was onto something.
Right.
But okay, but not trivializing suffering. Wait, so Marcel Duchamp, he's the one who did the urinal?
Yes, the fountain.
Yeah, that's not blasphemous. Is it hot or is it not ridiculous?
Well, at MoMA right now, it's hot because it's that he has a whole
Oh,
retrospective
really?
there that I hope
Okay.
to right about once summer starts. Because I think Marcel Duchamp, many claim he's this big atheist and hates art and wants to destroy everything, but he's actually one of the biggest moralists of our time. Because for
Because he
him,
didn't put a crucifix in the
well,
urinal.
but for him, he actually said because of World War One, the world doesn't deserve beauty anymore.
Yeah, yeah,
And
okay.
also, too, he's challenging this whole notion that,
Mm,
oh, if we just make
yeah,
everything look beautiful, then suddenly people will behave better. And he says, well, that doesn't work because you killed millions of people,
yeah,
and France and Italy are all very beautiful places.
yeah.
So what are you doing? So
Mm,
he's challenging our idea of what really beauty
yeah.
means and is. Um,
Hmm.
and so I think he's pretty great.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
has a lot to say for the spiritual. And too, for him, like he was very much against art as the thing you look at. He wanted art to do something more.
Hmm.
And so I think he was really onto something with that. And so Fountain is fun just because the gallery he applied
Yeah.
it to said submit anything, and he was just pushing back on them, and it was just
Yeah.
became this big joke. But
Also, okay, speaking of MoMA, Martina Abramovich,
mm,
performance artist,
okay,
you know
not
her.
familiar.
Oh, okay. I'll leave her alone then. Some people say she's extremely satanic, maybe
Oh,
more than Madonna. Um, Monastery Icons, you know the company?
I think in my brain somewhere, yeah,
Like all the like Catholic churches
yeah,
buy
yeah.
them because
Hmm.
they're like really cheap.
Right. And they're
You
on the little boards and
yeah,
everything. Yeah, I think the
they're
Jesuits gave me a few when I was
they're
discerning.
not hot.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, they're kind of ugly. Um, Baroque churches,
Not hot.
not hot.
Not
Why?
hot. Not hot.
Because
I
of
think
colonialism?
no, I think just
Your people built them.
that's right. Yeah, right. That's Jesuit art according to
Yeah.
Luther. But I think it's had its time, and I think people are now
Mm.
trying to like bring it back as if like this is going to save something, but um yeah, I don't think so.
Doesn't do it for you. If it ain't
Um,
Baroque,
right.
it's
Yeah.
gonna fix it.
I think what would be hot is like the Proto-Renaissance, the Sienese guys.
Okay.
Those guys are great.
All
And the
right.
show at the Met last December was
Mm.
on, and that was just every review was just amazing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
that
I went to that one.
yeah,
Yeah. 70s church architecture.
I would say also not hot at the moment. No,
Yeah,
not hot.
well, your confrere, Father James Martin, disagrees. He said during Hot or Not that it's nice and relatable. I don't agree, respectfully, Father
Yeah,
Martin, but
styles speak to different folk.
yeah,
And
I reminded him. So in America Magazine, he had an amazing interview with Camille Paglia back in the 90s. And she said that 70s Catholic Church architecture, it looks like airports or
oh, okay,
like
yeah,
Chamber of Commerce
right,
buildings or something. So she, even though she's a pagan, atheist, Catholic, she hates it. Yeah, I can't do the seven. Like I get it if it's like you have a nice community and then it feels homey, but like objectively, I'm like, yeah, I
right.
can't do this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But
Mm.
doesn't do it. If you had to pick
If I had to
Baroque or
pick Baroque
seven,
for
yeah,
sure,
okay, there
100%.
we go.
Yeah.
All right, so the exhibit here has finished, but the pieces will reappear.
They will reappear in various
Okay,
locations, to be determined.
all right.
Um, hopefully, I'm working with Fordham now to have a next show in the
Mhm.
fall. So we'll make a few new things on that.
Okay.
Um, building off the Sharon Tate painting from this show,
Mhm.
kind of engaging this idea of celebrity and how we treat our religious figures. Are they
Yeah.
people we just know about, or do they people we actually know?
Mm.
So that's what's coming up. So
Okay, so people can look out for that. You
yeah.
have a website,
Hmm.
you're on socials, they can find you.
Right.
But yeah, Nick, thanks for coming up.
Thanks, Stephen. It's been great.
All right. So, yes, I do.